Okay, we're going to start from the Mishnah today. Mishnah on Samach Zayin Amid Beis, 67, 67b. Is that correct? We thank Hashem that we're able to learn every day. Plus, we're learning, we should have the base of Migdash. Should be a panacea. Mishnah says like this. Five cases that the woman cannot eat truma because of the case that she's in. For both ways. Now, what does it mean both ways? There's two possibilities how a woman could eat truma. Either she's a bas kayin. If she enters into a relationship with someone that's not a kayin, so she can't eat truma anymore. It's one option. Other option is that she's a bas Yisrael and she's getting married to a kayin. And then when she enters into that relationship, then she can eat truma. The only thing is she's not fully entered and then she can't. So paislin means that she's a bas kayin and now she can't eat truma. Lay machilin means she didn't enter in enough that she should be able to eat truma. So now we go through the cases. For Uber, start again the Mishnah. Forget what we're talking about over here. Otherwise, Uber is the fetus. So the fetus would cause her not to eat truma because she's now married to a paisel her from truma. She's now married to a Yisrael, and she's pregnant. The husband died. She wants to go back to her father's house. She can't. She has a child with it's not born yet, but the child that's not a kayin. Or she's married to a kayin. Only problem is that the husband passed away. So now she should really not be able to eat truma unless she has a child. Well, she does, but the child wasn't born yet. Only a yulud would cause her to eat, but not a fetus. Right, Jeff? It doesn't feed. Fetus doesn't feed us. Okay, Yevamos. Yevamos case number two. Case number two. Okay, she's a bas kayin. She's married to Reuven. Reuven passed away. Reuven's a Yisrael. No children. So she goes back to her father's house to eat truma. She could eat truma. Problem is that she has to marry Shimon. She's a shemeres yavam to Shimon. Because of that, she can't really go back to her father's house fully. She can't eat truma in her father's house. The yavam is paisel her from truma. Or, let's say Reuven was a kayin, and she's a bas Yisrael. She's married to Reuven. Reuven passed away. While she was married, she was allowed to eat truma. Now that he passed away, unless she has a child, she can't continue to eat truma. So here she's a shemeres yavam. It's not a child, but she's attached to Shimon, the brother, but that's not enough of a marriage to feed her truma. Okay, next case, Erison. She's betrothed. So if she's a bas kayin and she's betrothed to Yisrael Kisiya Ishzar, so she can't eat truma because she's marrying out. She's marrying a zar. But if she's a bas Yisrael and she's marrying a kayin, so it's not good enough because she's not fully married. She's only Erison. Okay. Cherish. Cherish is referring to the cherish that doesn't really have a marriage. She's a deaf mute. So the rabbis instituted that there is a kedushin there. So if she's a bas kayin and she's marrying a cherish, that's a Yisrael. So the rabbis instituted that that's considered a good marriage. So we have to accept that and say that she can't eat truma. But if she's a Yisrael and the cherish is a kayin, we can't say that that's enough to cause her to eat truma because the biblical law is that's not a real marriage. She doesn't have the mental capacity to make a marriage. Okay.
So the Rabbanim said it's enough.
Invalidate her.
You can marry, but it's not considered a biblical marriage.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's rabbinic marriage.
Rabbinic marriage, right?
We have that today.
In weird cases, you can come up with a marriage that's only rabbinic, and then you have to do certain things to. Yeah. Let's say there's a 9-year-old boy. The pshat over here, the Gemara is going to need to explain to us. There's a machlekes Abai and Rava what's going on. But this is also going to be a case where, at least how did Rava learn it? Rava learns it that we're dealing with. He's a puzzle. He's a young kid, 9 years old, that he was a convert that really wasn't supposed to marry in yet, and he married in. He's supposed to wait 3 generations or something. Whatever the case is, he lives with a Jewish girl. That girl can now not eat truma because she becomes puzzle, even though he's only 9 years old. It's not an adult yet, but because a 9-year-old can have relations, so that's considered like she lived with a puzzle. So what does that have to do with the ein machilin? What does that have to do with the Gemara? The Gemara is going to say, or Rashi is going to say later, that it's only one of the scenarios in this case. Number 5 is only half. Okay. Safik shuben tes shana v'yom echad, safik she'enai. Let's say it's a doubt. This is going back on Erison. We said that an arusa to a kohen is not enough, and an arusa to a Yisrael is enough to mess her up that she can't eat truma. Let's say the boy is not necessarily. No, I'm jumping ahead. Safik shubentes safik sheinai is a continuation of the case before of ben teshanim. So, and now the next case. Safik heavy beisar, safik shlei heavy. Let's say we're not sure if he's mature yet, and then he married a woman. So that's going to be enough to invalidate the woman if he's a Yisrael from eating truma. Nafal habayas alav al basafik. This case we mentioned before, earlier, like a month ago. If the house, well, let's set up, yeah, 7 years ago. Let's say Ruvain is married to Shimon's daughter, right? Ruvain's married to Shimon's daughter, which is his niece, which is acceptable. That's allowed. He married his niece, and he has another wife as well. He's in the house with his niece, and the roof collapsed. Now, if the niece died first, and Ruvain survived, and then he passed away a moment later, so then Ruvain was without. Ruvain was without that wife. He only had one remaining wife that was not related to Shimon at the time of his passing, because Shimon's daughter had died first. So then, we don't know that, but we don't. There's a possibility that she died first, that the wife died first, which is the daughter of Shimon. If that's the case, then Shimon has to do yibam on the tzara. However, the other way, if Ruvain died first and his daughter survived for a moment, so then Ruvain passed away, leaving 2 wives. One of them is Shimon's daughter. He can't do. There's no yibam or chalitza. That was the first Mishnah. So, what does it say over here? Nafal abayis alav al basachim. Vein yedu eze meis rishon. We don't know which one died first. So tzarasa chiletzes lam yasyabemes. In that case, you have to do chalitza. You can't do yibam because there's a strong possibility, right, that maybe Ruvain died first, and that would leave a close relative to yibam, which invalidates the whole yibam. You with me?
Is there a common theme principle that's running through these various decisions?
Sounds like they're all the same almost. That is.
It's not the same to me. It's half.
The not the
relationship.
scenarios.
Starting with the keyboard.
Right.
But the thing is that you put into something into the relationship. That's the thing.
What is it about Truma that makes it different than other marital practices? Privileges that
Because it's clear.
require all this.
I think it's the only time that's prescribed through.
Yeah, it seems like a secondary issue, but nevertheless, we're using the secondary issue to judge if it's considered a marriage. As we're taking truma and we're using it as a gauge to say how married she is. Yeah. That's what it seems. However, let's take a look. We're going to go through the source of each of these. We start with the fetus. Ibas kayin li Yisrael. If it's a bas kayin that's marrying a Yisrael, pasala. So she becomes invalidated because of the uber. Why? Kinura. It says v'shava el beisa via kinura. Remember that last week's parsha? Yeah, I just started the Gemara. She returns to her father's house like in her youth. Well, prat muberes. This would exclude a muberes. It's not like in her youth. In her youth, she wasn't pregnant. Ibas Yisrael kayini. Let's say it's a bas Yisrael that's marrying a kayin. Like can't feed her. Feed her. Why? Because it says Yilid Beisayer, Yilud Michael, Sheni Yoladena Michael. Only the child causes her to eat. Yilid Beisayer, right? So only the only one that could feed is if he's born. Once he's born, then she'll be able to eat, but before he's born, he can't. Yavam, the Yavam we said does the same thing to this woman where she can't eat truma. Ibas kayin li Yisraeli. If it's a daughter of a kayin that was married to Reuben, that's Yisrael, and of course Shimon is also Yisrael. So pasala, the Yavam ruins her from eating truma. Why? B'shavel beisavia prat l'shmeres Yavam. She returns to her father's house to eat truma, but here she can't return because the Yavam is pulling her back. Ibas Yisrael kayini. If she was originally a bas Yisrael, like Michaela, he can't feed her yet because kinyan pekaspayam rachmanava kinyan de'echavu. It has to be something that he acquired. He didn't acquire yet. This was his brother's acquisition until he actually acquires it. Va'irisin, if it's only a betrothal but not a full marriage, ibas kayin li Yisraeli. If it's a bas kayin that's marrying a Yisrael, pasala, so this invalidates her because he's a Yisrael, the kanya bahavaya, because it says a bas kayin kisiya li ishzar. A daughter of a kayin, when she'll become she'll be married to a Ishzar in Havaya. That term Havaya, to be, already takes place by the Eirison.
But that's not a prohibition for a bus.
There's no prohibition. There's no prohibition. It's just that she can't eat Truma because she's now in a new family. Ibas Yisrael Kayin. If she's marrying a Kayin, well, like Maichala Mishum Deula, she's a Bas Yisrael. We have that should be enough. The wedding should be enough. The betrothal should be enough. The only problem is that Ula has a statement in Masechta Ksubas. And who was here? Mr. What was his name? Eli Berkowitz was here. He mentioned this before. He said that she may go to her father's house. He'll serve her truma food, and she'll let her father and her brother drink from the cup. Truma wine, let's say. Now, let me taste that. Now I'll take a sip of her wine. It was really truma. So until she's actually married, the husband should not serve her truma. It's a gzera. Yeah. Okay. V'acherish. This was the deaf mute. Ibas kayin li Yisrael. If it's a daughter of a kayin that's marrying a cherish that's a Yisrael, pasala. So he invalidates her from eating truma, the hakanya b'takanta derabanan, because the rabbis made a takana that should be considered a marriage. I guess you can look at this two ways. The rabbis instituted that it should be a marriage, and then it becomes a marriage. or the rabbis instituted that it's a marriage and it stays a rabbinic marriage. Let's say Dalit Amish Shaladam kind of is a Kenyan. So does that make it mine biblically, or does that make it mine only rabbinically? I assume it makes it mine biblically. I'm saying it's a Kenyan derabanan, but now my ownership of it, you can't tell me. No one looks into the money when I'm going to marry a woman. No one's going to say, "Did you acquire that through a rabbinic?" No one goes back in the history of how I acquired that. Did you? Was it a rabbinic acquisition? Did you pay cash? Cash is a Kenyan. Okay. Ibas Yisrael Lakayani, if it's the other way, if the Cherish is the Kayan, like Michael, Kenyan Kasper Rachman of Lav Bar Kenyan, this person can't acquire. It has to be that it's not a real marriage. It has to be even after the fact it's only a rabbinic marriage. Otherwise, he's a Kayan, she should be allowed to eat Truma. If the rabbis would have instituted that it's a marriage, and then it becomes a marriage biblically because of that institution, so then he would be allowed to feed her Truma. But now, obviously, it's not. Obviously, even the end result of a cherish has to be that it remains rabbinic. Yeah, it makes sense, no? No, it was Misa Pidei Shemayim, and then it's B'Shegeg. I think he just adds a fifth. He pays back with a fifth, right? Was last week's parsha.
He has to give a carbon. Which carbon?
There was a carbon me'ila. There was a me'ila, but that was for Kodesh, not for Truma. That's only if he ate things that were like sacrifices or something. Or he had benefit from something that belonged to the base of Migdash. Okay, then Teisha Shanim Chulu, we mentioned that if someone is 9 years old, we didn't get into what happens. We didn't explain the case, but we were saying that a boy that's 9 years old already is enough to invalidate. So let's see. Kasal Kadaitach. Gemara doesn't know what this case was talking about. B'Shemeres Yavam, we think that it's talking about B'Shemeres Yavam Leben Teisha Yevem Echad. We think we're talking about like this, that Reuven passed away. He leaves his wife as a widow, and Shimon is Reuven's brother is 9 years old in a day. Teisha Shanim Yevem Echad. So we say that that's going to ruin her from eating Truma. Either because she was a Bas Kayan and now she can't go back to her father's house, or she's a Yisrael and he's a Kayan and it's not enough of a marriage. Let's take a look what's going on over here. Are you telling me that he's a Yisrael and she wants to go back to her father's house to eat Truma, but she can't because she's attached to Shimon that's 9 years old and he's a Yisrael? So Katnami Mifsal Pasal. If Shimon wasn't 9 years old, if he was 8, 7, 6, he would also passel her because she would have to wait for him to grow up to do Yibam or Chalitza. And meanwhile, she can't eat Truma anyway. If he's a Kayan, so so even if he's an adult, he can't feed. So this age, you chose an insignificant age that doesn't change whether he's younger or older. That it's an insignificant date.
Well, he's not Shomer Mitzvahs.
Right, that's true. He's younger than that, but he's old enough to have relations, really? Which would mean that for Yivam, that would be enough. He's Royal Labia. That's the significance of this age. The only thing is there's no halachic significance when it comes to Truma. This is like one of these birthdays that you don't know like what the significance, 18, 21, it's like that's like very significant. You get to do this, you get to do that. But this is what's 12. There's no right. But we're saying that what does it do for Truma? because if he's younger than 9, she anyways can't eat truma of her father. And if he's trying to feed her truma, she anyways can't eat truma even if she's 9. Amar Abaya. Abaya says, Hacha biyavam ben teisha shana v'yemechad abal yavim teyaskinan. We're talking about not that he's just standing there as she's a shemeres yavam. No, they already had relations. Well, now is this considered a marriage? The midiraisa kanyala. Biblically, that's already married because they consummated the marriage of in Yibam. That's all it takes is the relations. I could have thought that maybe because this is a biblical marriage, Leah, Reuven's widow, is now biblically married to Shimon. Kamash Malan comes to tell us that Asabias ben Teshana v'yemechet kamaymer begadol. It's not a full marriage. It's only like Maimer. It's as if it's a rabbinic marriage. It's as if it's only a betrothal because he's still not mature enough. He's not a gadol. If he would be an adult, then she would already be eating truma. But because he's still a child, so although biblically it works, but it's as if it's only rabbinic. Well, Amalei Rava says to Abaya, if that's the case that you want to tell me that that's what it's talking about, Ihachi. What are you telling me? You're telling me that a 9-year-old boy, Yavam, that lives with the Yevama, cannot feed her truma yet, even though he's a kohen. So Sefer Diktani Safik Ben Teshana v'yemechad Safik Sheinai. You have another case. Let's say it's a doubt if he's 9 years old. What did we say over there? They can't feed him truma. So Hashtavade Ben Tesla Michael Safik Mibai. What is your next case that says if we're not sure if he's 9 years old? What happened with a 9-year-old? We said that if the whole point of the 9-year-old was to tell me that he can't feed her truma, even though he's a kohen. So we said if he's a Safik, so you also can't feed a truma. But even if he was a vada, you can't feed truma. So why are you telling me the Safik? If even if it was for sure, it doesn't work. Elama Rava says that can't be what's going on over here. What it means is not that they don't feed, that they ruin. She's a baskayan, and she has relations with a boy that's 9 years old. Now she can't eat truma. Now, what would be the suffix? Suffix would be telling me that I have to be strict as well. By a vadai, you see the other way. The other way, I would say, why are you telling me the suffix even if by a vadai it doesn't work? Now I'm saying that by the vadai it doesn't work, but what about the suffix? I say the suffix also doesn't work. Because it's the other way around. By here it's passing. I wouldn't have known that a suffix passels. By the vadai if the vadai is not enough of a marriage, a definite marriage is not enough. So then if it's a suffix, for sure it's not enough. So this is the opposite. So this would work. So it was taught in a brisa. Let's see what we're talking about. A 9-year-old boy. That's a ger amaini. Wow, he converted already at 9 from Amain. It could be his parents converted. It doesn't mean that he converted. It doesn't have to mean that he converted.
So
Right.
Someone from the nation of Ammon can't convert.
Well, that's right. They can't marry in. They can't get married. Yeah. Yeah, Amen and Maya. Or let's, yeah, or another convert. So Gera Maini and Mayavi, the only other way of saying this, there's two possibilities of saying this. One is that he actually converted on his own. He's 9 years old, and the Bezdin, he can convert al das Bezdin. The Bezdin can accept the Torah for him, and then when he's older, he can decide if he wants to reject it. The other possibility is that a 9-year-old maybe. When do we say that maturity is 13? That's only by a Jew. By a non-Jew, we have to actually test him. We can say that maybe, well, he was mature already. He could actually make a decision. Yeah, so there comes out a little bit of a complication when it comes to a child conversion that's already theoretically mature, that's not 13. That could be a full conversion, you know. Okay. Or let's say it's a Mitzri or a Daimi. All of those they have to wait 3 generations. Or a Kuti, and he's 9 years old. Or a Nasin, he's not allowed to marry in. Or he's a Chalal. Chalal is no problem, just can't marry a Chalal that lives with a girl would make the girl into a Chalala. She had relations with someone that would make her pasul kahuna. Or a mamzer, which for sure makes her pasul. Now she can't marry now she can't marry a kayan. Okay. Shabo, any of these people, Shabo, any of these boys that are 9 years old in the day, Shabo al kahanas leviv Yisraelis paslua, the invalidator from Truma. Okay. That's how Rava learns the case of the Mishnah. We read the Mishnah. We said we're going to have to wait to see in the Gemara. Here we have 2 pshatim. We have Abaya's pshat and Rava's pshat. Yeah. But what it means is that if she marries a Kayan, even though she wasn't supposed to, because she was already puzzled to a Kayan, but even as married to a Kayan, she still can't eat Shumah. Yeah. Even if they perform the wedding when they were not supposed to, she won't be allowed to eat Truma because of this. It also means that she can't marry a Kayan, but we're discussing the Truma. So Gemara says, "V'amidiktani seifa imeinim ruyim lavi b'Yisrael areil psulim echal dereish lab psulim askinan." And Daf Samach Tes on the bottom, we're going to have another Mishnah that's going to tell us. Starts on the bottom about different people that can't marry a Kayan. People that. And it says that if they can't marry in, they would passel her from eating truma. So now you're telling me the same case before with a 9-year-old that also passels. Why are you telling me the case twice? Obviously, the ratio over here with the 9-year-old is not talking about the case that it's going to say later. Where it says no, Reisha b'psule kol seif b'psule kuna. Later on, it's going to give me another case of kayan, things that only invalidate a kayan, as opposed to over here, which these people would theoretically invalidate everyone. In other words, they're puzzle psule kol versus psule kuna. Okay, so in other words, we do have 2 separate cases, and Rava's explanation for the Mishnah could be correct. Okay, the Gemara now says Gufa. This is a problematic Gufa because we're about to quote a Brisa. And according to the way we've been learning for the last 4 years, by the way, we started Rosh Chodesh Sivan 4 years ago. So we were studying when we used the word Gufa, when we used the word Amar Mar. Amar Mar is for a Brisa, and Gufa is for Amiroim. And so here we have Gufa, and we're quoting a Tosefta. So this is a problematic Gufa.
Wow.
Yeah, you have to look it up in the manuscripts to see if it's really the original.
Right.
Okay. It says Ben Tes Shanim v'Yei Mechad Geramaini, a 9-year-old convert of Amain and Mayavi, or from Mayav, which those are not allowed to marry in. Mitzri or Daimi, they have to wait 3 generations. Kuti Nasin Chala Mamzer Shabal Kehenes Leviv Yisraelis paslan or psul. There's another version over here to this text. It's the aleph. Paslua, the invalidator. What are they invalidator for? She can't eat truma. If she's a kayanis, and if she would be, it's only relevant for the kayanis. That means she wants to go back to her father's house. She can't. It's too late. She's already in.
Invalid marriage.
That's the next thing. 1 second. The first thing is that
Even
if-
it was Yisrael, she can't eat truma either.
well, yeah, but she couldn't eat truma beforehand either. Yisrael
Before
can't
she
eat
was
truma.
married. Oh, is she? She's a Kohen. No?
Oh, so there's 2 points. First point is let's say her father was a kohen, and she wants to go back to her father's house and eat truma. So because she had a relationship with one of these fellows, she can't go back to her father's house and eat truma. That's one. Paslua, that would be the kohenes. And let's say they lived with a Levi or Yisraelis, then these people can. The only relevance would be that they can't now marry a kohen. They're not allowed to marry a kohen. So there's really 2 conclusions here. Paslua has 2 meanings to it. One is truma for the kohenes. Another one is marriage for the Levi and Yisraelis. Rabbi Yossi says, Kol shezari pasel paisel, Kol shein zari pasel eina paisel. Gemara is going to say that when we talk about 3 generations, the last generation, the second one, or the third one, even though that one can't marry in, but the 4th one can, Rabbi Yossi has a little bit of a leniency there that says that it won't invalidate a woman. You follow that? Okay. Yeah. And the last opinion, which we have to wait for the Gemara to explain, Rabbi Shimon Kol shat Tanasi bita at Tanasi al Menusay. If you can't marry the person's daughter, then you can't marry his widow either. We'll see in the Gemara on Samach Tes what the difference is between the 2 of Rabbi Yossi and Shimon Gamliel. What's the source? What's the source that a woman could become invalid from eating truma? Amar Rabbi Yehuda Marav. Rav Yehuda says the name of Rav. We really need a chumash to look at this, unless you remember last week's parsha. Amar Kra, ubas kayin kisiya leish zar. If a daughter of a kayin marries a non-kayin, she cannot eat from what's taken away, what's elevated from the sacrifices. Yeah, and by the way, in these nice Gemaras, these blue Gemaras, the psukim are on the side. So, yeah, we don't have it. You just get it in the English.
Yeah.
They said this boy goes to the library. His father's taking him, so he sees an encyclopedia there. He says, "What is this?" He says, "This is an encyclopedia." He says, "Wow, someone printed out the whole Wikipedia and bound it." Okay. So
Okay, yeah, they're getting started.
now they're giving them away. You can get it for free.
Easy, we're walking
So-
memory lane with Dr. Stein.
We have a pasuk that says, if she marries a non-kayan, she marries a Yisrael, she can't eat hektish. She can't eat from the, not hektish, she can't eat from the kachim. The way the Gemara learns it here is slightly different. The way the Gemara learns it is not that she's married to a Yisrael, she's married. That's the way I would have read the pasuk. The Gemara learns it now. Kivan shenivala la pasla. Kisiya leish zar. The zar over here means someone that's invalid. She had a relations with someone that was a pasul. That's the zar. So now she becomes pasul. It's more than just what the pshat that we were saying, that she marries a Yisrael. Kisiya leish zar. The Gemara says, 1 second. You're giving me a new pshat in the pasuk, but what about the simple pshat in the pasuk? What about the simple pshat? If she's married to Yisrael, she can't eat truma anymore. She can't eat from the kachim. You took the pasuk and you're using it for something else. I need it for the basic halacha. It says, oh no, the basic halacha of that a woman, a bas kayan that marries a Yisrael, can't eat truma. Hahimi v'shavel beisanaria kinura milechem v'yataychal nafka. I know that from another pasuk. That if her husband passes away and there's no children, she goes back to her father's house like in her youth. Since it says that she goes back to her father's house and she eats, Michlal, that implies that while she was married, she can't eat. So the fact that while she's married to a Yisrael, she can't eat, that I know from the fact that when she's not married, she returns. So what do I do with the pasuk? Kisil Zar, that's telling me she has relations with someone that's puzzled for her. Gemara says, no, we don't accept that. Why? Because that pasuk of a shevel beisavina kinura would not tell me everything. I would have thought that there's an assay, a positive command that she goes back to her father's house and she eats. That implies a negative command. Now, a negative command that's only implied from a positive command is considered a positive command. Where do I get the negative prohibition? Lav haba mechlal asay. The Torah tells me to do something. That implies that in a different case, it would be prohibited. So that's a lav that's implied from an asay. Does that have the strength of a lav, or does that have the strength of an asay? So I could think, well, we usually say that a lav haba mechlal asay is an asay. It only has the strength of an asay, which means there's no malchus. It's not considered a lav. But to have a direct negative command, that would give malchus. So if a woman marries a Yisrael, she's a bas kain, she marries a Yisrael. If I don't have the pasuk of bas kain kisil ishzar to tell me that a bas kain marries a Yisrael is not allowed to eat truma, then I would think that it's only an asay and there's no malchus if she eats truma. Mm-hmm. So I still need the pasuk to teach me that there's malchus, that it's a lav. Lav b'machlal asay. So kas rachmana hayla lav. In other words, you threw at me another pasuk to tell me you know that anyway. I do know it, but it's not, doesn't give me the strength that I would need to if I would have that pasuk. So the Gemara says, well,
It can go so far.
Did you study logic in high school or in college?
Why you?
Who said I'm logical? I figured that when I went into
Solvechik said that.
No, in logic, but the people that study logic, they have like words for each logical thought. You know, like this way of logic has a certain name, like the Gemara, a fortiori. You know, it's a certain type of logic. But someone should go through the Gemara and attribute the names of the logical terms for each type of thinking. It'd be a very interesting. No, because people that have studied logic and they would want to study Gemara, it would be nice to have for them. Anyway, okay.
I'm not doing that. Don't talk about it.
So the Gemara says, Lav. You're looking for a lav. I have another pasuk. The pasuk says, Kol zar le'yechal kodesh. Any stranger should not eat from the sacrifices. Now that is not a bas kayan that's married to a zar, but the Gemara is learning it. That what we're thinking is that when she marries a zar, she becomes a zar. So automatically, v'chol zar le'yechal kodesh would apply to her as well. That's what we're thinking now. So we have another lav. Okay. The Gemara says, "Hahumi ba'ilei legufei." 1 second. You now took a pasuk to tell me that a bas kayan that's married to a zar can't eat kodesh. 1 second. That pasuk is telling me that a zar can't eat kodesh. That pasuk is also used. So it says, well, Trey v'chol zar ksivi. I have two of those verses v'chol zars. So one of them could teach me also that the woman married to the zar is also not allowed to eat kodesh. Second, vakatami by like Rabbi Yossi bar Chanina. But what about the teaching of Rabbi Yossi bar Chanina? Rabbi Yossi bar Chanina v'chol zar zaras amarti lach v'layaninas. That pasuk of v'chol zar layechal kodesh, which we're now teaching me that it means truma. That not to eat truma. You know what it's actually teaching me is that a stranger is not allowed to eat truma. But a kohen that's in einin, that's in mourning, I know he's not allowed to eat from a sacrifice, but truma he's allowed to eat. Kol zar layechal kodesh, zar v'layainen. An einin is yes allowed. So I need that pasuk to teach me something else, not to teach me that a woman married to a zar is not allowed to eat truma. The Gemara says, "Rabbi Yossi bar Chanina min zar v'chol zar nafka." That's just from a diak. It says v'chol zar. The extra word v'chol that includes the zar v'lo yoinen. The Gemara says, "1 second, v'katami b'olelek detanya." Yeah, if we had all on a computer screen, we could make it like disappear when we've used it up, and then we see what's left. Yeah, so you have to keep everything in your mind. Where are we holding? But we need it for a braysak. A woman that gets married to a zar. Then the husband passed away. She goes back to her father's house. There were no children, right? She goes back to her father's house. She's now allowed to eat truma because her father's a kohen. She's allowed to eat truma, but she can't eat from chazav v'shaik of the karbanos. No, not of the karbanos. Chazav v'shaik of the karbanos.
The zar is what? A Yisrael?
A Yisrael. It just means a stranger. Zar, strange. How did the word? Somehow I used to think that zar is similar to a stranger. I don't know where I got that from, but the word huh? No, I'm talking about in like phonetic, that the sound of it had another. Okay, whatever. She doesn't go back fully to her father's house. She can't eat everything that her brothers are eating, but she can still eat truma. That's what I learned from. Yeah, that is the halacha. Well, a second. Rav Chisda, Amar Ravina, Rav Shila, Mikra. What's the pasuk? The ksiv baskain kisil yeshzar. He b'trumas hakadashim leiseichel b'mura min hakadashim. You're trying to free up the pasuk of baskain kisil yeshzar. That's what we're trying to do. I'm trying to say a baskain kisil yeshzar is coming to tell me that if she becomes puzzle, that if she has relations with someone that's puzzle, not only if she gets married, but if she has relations with someone that's puzzle, so that she's already invalid. Gemara says, 1 second, that pasuk, I actually have something else to teach me. That Baskain Kisil Zar, she can only eat from Truma Sakadashim, but not Bemura Min Akadashim. She can only eat from the Truma, but she can't eat from what's elevated, from the Karbanas. The Gemara says, if that's what you want to use the pasuk for, Simkin lichtav kra hi bekadashim leiseichel. My betruma sakadashim shamet minei tarti. The extra word truma sakadashim is teaching me both. Okay. Ashkechan kehenes. We just figured out that a kehenes becomes puzzle to eat truma if she has relations with someone that she wasn't supposed to have relations with. She can't eat truma. Even if she gets married, even if she goes back to her father's house, she can't eat truma. Levia v'Yisraelis minala. How do you know that a Levia, a girl that's not a Baskayan, or a Yisraelis, also not a Baskayan, how do you know that she can't eat truma? It says, Kadamar Rabba Amar Rav, Bas Ubas, Hachanami Bas Ubas. It says Ubas Kayan. It says twice. Ubas Kayan Kisila. 1 second. It says before we get to that. It says Ubas Kayan Kisila Lishar. That's telling me that the extra vav is teaching me more than just the Bas Kayan, and it's teaching me that anyone that's Kisila Ishzar is also going to be invalid. It says, come on, who are you going like? Rabbi Akiva the Darish Vavin? Are you going like Rabbi Akiva that learns every single letter, including a vav, that is teaching me extra things? The Gemara says not necessarily. I feel Tamer Rabbanan could even be the Rabbanan that we're going to have later. And Daf Samachtes, there's a machlekes how they're going to learn bas ubas when it says the extra vav. The Rabbanan don't learn it. However, kula ubas kra yaserehi. Even according to the Rabbanan, they're going to say that it's coming to include even someone that's not a bas kayan. Why? Because we have two psukim one after another. It starts off with the bas kayan, then I have another second pasuk after that says a bas kayan. Now it didn't have to say a bas kayan at all because the pasuk preceding it already was talking about a bas kayan. Ashkechan l'truma l'kahuna minala. I find that they can't eat truma. What about kahuna? This is very odd what's going on over here, but the Gemara is gonna bring out the oddity of it, because what we're talking about is a kohenes can't go back to her father's house to eat truma. That was reasonable. She had relations with someone that invalidates her. When she goes back, we had a pasuk. A Leviah and Yisraelis could never eat truma. The only question was if they marry someone that they weren't allowed to marry because now they were invalid to marry them, can they eat? Because they had relations with someone that invalidated them, now they can't marry a kain. So can they still eat truma? So we said no, they can't eat truma because of baska. Well, now how do we know that they're not allowed to get married to the kain? So it's ashkan l'truma l'kuhuna minalan. How do you know they can't marry the kain? The Gemara says 1 second. Isn't that what we were talking about the whole time? When you were talking about a Leviah and Yisraelis, weren't you referring to that they can't marry the Kayan? The Ila Truma, if you were just telling me this whole conversation was all about Truma, were you really thinking that they were acceptable to eat Truma somehow? The whole thing was about the marriage, and you were telling me the whole thing that they couldn't marry the kain and therefore they can't eat truma. That was the whole point over here. It says Alam alai. Why couldn't they eat truma? Mishkachas dekachla b'shvil bina. Maybe if she had a child from a kain, she is able to eat truma. But now she's becoming invalid. Now she can't eat truma. It says b'shvil bina kal v'chaymer. 1 second. If she would only be allowed to eat because of her son, then there would be a kal v'chaymer that she can't eat truma now that she had this relations with someone that was invalid. Why? Ma kehenes de b'kedusha de nafsha achla. A kehenes that normally eats on her own. Why? Because she's a bas kayan. She has her own sanctity. However, pasala, when she has a relations with this person that's invalid, now she can't. She loses everything. The Levian Yisraelis that don't have their own sanctity, for sure they can't eat truma if they have this relationship. For sure they never even had it in the first place. They was only like coming in as a guest, sort of, because the son was eating, so they could eat. Gemara says, no. That logic, you could flip it around exactly the opposite, and I could tell it back to you, and that's exactly the point. That's the term. So we need these kehenes de kadesh gufa pasala. A kehenes that was originally kadesh, she was not supposed to have that relations, and she did. So it messes up her kedusha. Ha de like kadesh gufa. But this woman, she was never a kehenes. Okay, nishkefelach, she had the relations that she wasn't supposed to. Maybe. Nishkefelach's not in the Gemara. Yeah, it's not so terrible that she had this relations. So loy pasala ela lekahuna. It would only invalidate her from marriage. but not for truma. The Gemara says, 1 second. Kal v'chaymer migrusha. I could learn this as a kal v'chaymer from a grusha. Ma grusha shemutaris b'truma, a divorced woman. She's allowed to eat truma. What would the case be where she's eating truma? Either she had a child, her husband was a kayan, or her father's she goes back to her father's house. Asura lakuna, but she can't marry a kayan. Zusha sura b'truma in a din shapsul lakuna. Once I would get that she can't eat truma, then I would automatically know that she can't marry. We're going back to the Leviah that had this relations. Kumar says, 1 second, but now you're using a kal v'chaymer. The chimas hirin min adin. Do you tell me halachas, warnings, negative commandments based on logic, based on a kal v'chaymer? Kumar says, gilim el sabalmo. It's just revealing. It's more than just a kal v'chaymer. It's bringing out the basic law that someone that would have this relations would both be invalid from marrying and would be pasul le truma. Okay, let's leave it over here.
Good job.